I-24 News, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu revealed hundreds of thousands of Iranian nuclear documents recently obtained by Israeli intelligence. He says the materials prove that Iran is still pursuing a nuclear weapons program and has been trying to hide it.
From the outside, this was an innocent-looking compound. From the inside, it contained Iran's secret atomic archives locked in massive files.
Meantime, Israel is suspected to be behind another strike in Syria that targeted Iranian-linked bases. At least 16 people were killed, mostly Iranians.
In Kabul, Afghanistan, twin suicide bombs killed at least 25 people. The second bomber dressed as a journalist and killed 9 who had rushed to the scene.
Plus, hundreds of migrants who traveled with a caravan through Central America have vowed to wait at the U.S.-Mexico border until they are granted asylum.
I'm excited because we're going to hand ourselves over and we're going to see what kind of luck we have.
From the I-24 News Studios in Times Square in New York, this is Crossroads with David Schuster and Tal Heinrich.
The debate over the Iran nuclear deal has taken a dramatic turn. The Prime Minister of Israel on this day unveiled hundreds of thousands of files recently obtained from Iran that he said proves Iran has lied about its nuclear ambitions and is violating the terms of the nuclear agreement.
During his announcement, Netanyahu claimed that the materials show that Iran cannot be trusted and encouraged President Trump to withdraw from the deal next month. Correspondent Sibyl Marcellus has more.
Well, tonight I'm here to tell you one thing. Iran lied.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calling out Iran for lying about its nuclear weapons program before signing an agreement with the U.S. and other world powers. The Prime Minister declaring that Iran has not kept up its end of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, accusing Tehran of continuing to research and gather knowledge on nuclear development. And according to Netanyahu, paving the way for Iran to develop a whole arsenal of nuclear weapons should the deal ever collapse.
Even after the deal, Iran continued to preserve and expand its nuclear weapons know-how for future use. Why would a terrorist regime hide and meticulously catalog its secret nuclear files if not to use them at a later date?
The Prime Minister's dramatic presentation, backed by a half-ton of intelligence materials, he said, obtained from a secret vault in Iran.
Iran moved its nuclear weapons files to a highly secret location in Tehran. This is the Shourabad district in southern Tehran. This is where they kept the atomic archives, right here.
Iran has repeatedly claimed that it was not developing nuclear weapons. Netanyahu says the evidence shows they're lying. And Netanyahu says the evidence shows Iran failed to disclose the depth of its program to international monitors, an important part of the 2015 nuclear deal. Netanyahu expressed confidence that President Trump will nix the deal. The president has until May 12th to waive key sanctions on Iran. President Trump weighed in on Israel's findings and the nuclear agreement from the White House.
I think, if anything, what's happening today and what's happened over the last little while and what we've learned has really shown that I've been 100% right.
Netanyahu's powerful announcement comes on the heels of new missile strikes in Syria. The strikes hitting military bases reportedly used by Iran and its proxy militias near Hama and Aleppo. While no country has claimed responsibility for the attack, a British human rights group said it appeared Israel carried out the strike. Sibyl Marcellus, I-24 News.
To discuss, let's bring in senior Washington correspondent Dan Raviv. Dan, let's start to talk about Prime Minister Netanyahu's presentation. He was totally at his element this evening in Israel. What did you make of that?
I've never seen anything like it, Tal. You know, Israel's spy agency, the Mossad, has a very high reputation for doing things in secret. It's never expected that the Prime Minister of Israel will step onto a stage and show the volume of files that the Mossad somehow managed to steal from inside Iran and analyze. And then we saw slides, a lot of it in the language Farsi, but translated into English. Now, the Israeli contention is that there is still still a group in Iran's defense ministry that is out to design nuclear weapons and warheads that could fit onto the missiles that Iran is still developing. Critics of what Netanyahu did on this day, sorry about the traffic, critics say that there's no proof of any cheating after the middle of 2015, which was the start of the Iran nuclear accord. But I have to say that the Israeli and American officials as of this evening say, hey, it's quite clear. Iran lied then. We fully expect Iran is lying now. Tal and David.
So, Dan, what sort of impact does this have on President Trump and his decision that's coming up by May 12th?
It seems to further solidify his likely decision. Yep, even though he spoke about it on this day, he didn't absolutely tell reporters or the public that he's going to pull out of the Iran nuclear accord on May 12th. But he did not include there some message that, hey, now the Europeans, maybe they can quickly put pressure on Iran and save the nuclear accord. It didn't sound that way. President Trump said that Netanyahu's exhibition on this day showed that Trump was always right, that the Iran nuclear accord was terrible. It sure sounds like the U.S. will walk away. David and Tal.
Dan Raviv, we appreciate the report as always.
To discuss, let's bring in Ehud Elam, an Israeli national security analyst, and Jack Rice, former CIA officer and prosecutor. And Jack, first to you, just in terms of the ability to get this kind of intelligence, I mean, hundreds of thousands of documents out of a vault in Tehran and put them in Israeli hands. How big an operation is that? How much of a success?
No, it's huge. I mean, we look at what the Mossad is able to do and their capability. I mean, this really shows how deep they're willing to go, and they're willing to show all of it now. I mean, you're right at the introduction of this about generally the intelligence communities around the world don't like to show their success because it burns every bridge that they have. But in this particular case, it's clear that Netanyahu had one particular goal, and he had an audience of one, and he's trying to convince one guy in a White House.
And Ehud, Netanyahu presented what he called half a ton of intelligence material of Iran's nuclear program, but he did not show any pictures of scientists working on bombs, for example. What do you make of the material that he presented and the way he presented it?
Well, when I look at this, what I noticed... Please, go ahead.
Tries to basically understand that Prime Minister Netanyahu tries to show that there is a smoking gun, that the Iranians have been lying all the time and who cannot be trusted. Therefore, even if there is a chance to fix the agreement, Iran cannot be trusted, and then there has to be very tough measures in order to make sure that the Iranians are not trying to produce nuclear weapons.
But Ehud, wasn't the point of the agreement, I mean, it may strike a lot of people as not new that Iran was pursuing nuclear weapons. Wasn't the purpose of the agreement to be able to have some sort of inspection regime in order to make sure that they're not enriching uranium and taking some of those active steps to further a nuclear program?
Yes, it was the goal of the agreement, but it seems that it's not working, at least as Netanyahu sees that, and also others, that there is much more tougher measures in order to make sure the Iranians don't have any secret plans, and also that overall that there has to be a huge pressure on Iran with sanctions, and also because it's not only the goal to contain the Iranian nuclear program, but also to make the Iranian regime as weak as possible, because this is the main problem, the regime. Also the nuclear program, of course, but the challenge mainly is to try to get rid of the regime. It's like two different efforts, but are all part of the same strategy.
Jack, what do you think of the goal of Netanyahu's presentation? Was it only or mainly aimed at the Trump administration to convince the president to withdraw the deal, or maybe to even justify a future military act?
Well, I think it is both to some degree, but in the short term, it's about getting President Trump to move. You know, the real problem to distinguish between what your other guest just said is there is a difference between the nuclear program on one side and the regime on the other. The problem is one of the things that Netanyahu is doing is he's looking at the two synonymously. He's treating them exactly the same, that if he can weaken the regime, that is a good thing. Here is the problem. If we look at the nuclear agreement itself, what we have right now is the IAEA is in there, and what we have is no proof at all that there actually has been any violations whatsoever. In fact, the purpose of the nuclear agreement itself was because the Iranians were absolutely lying and were absolutely trying to acquire nuclear weapons. So they were trying to find a way to address that issue, not the ballistics question, not the question of the rogue state working in Syria or any place else in the world, but just the small compartmentalized parameters of the nuclear issue. The problem is this blows all of it out of the water if we go down that path.
Ehud, how do you see all of this being received around the world? I mean, there's a lot of skepticism here in the United States because of the intelligence that the United States presented before the Iraq War. A lot of people are saying, oh, this is just another faulty presentation that's designed for a specific policy aim. But what's your take on this?
I don't think it will change much because Russia and China don't want to basically to get rid of the agreement, and the Europeans are kind of in the middle between the American position, which is similar to the Israeli position. I don't think it's all part of a major effort that Netanyahu has been conducting in the last decade, even more, trying to contain Iran, and especially its nuclear program. You can also look at North Korea, because now there is a chance, although I'm not sure, that maybe North Korea will get rid of its nuclear weapons, and it's kind of connected to Iran, because there is a similar status between that you can apply to Iran and North Korea. So if you can do some progress with North Korea, maybe it can also help with Iran.
And Jack, do you think that Netanyahu's presentation, an Israeli cabinet meeting also overnight, and the suspected attack, some are pointing to Israel, is it all connected, what happened in Syria as well?
Well, I mean, this is the general view of Netanyahu, is that there is a need to go on the offensive here, but they are somewhat different. But there is the same connection between the support of the Iranians in Syria. But here's the problem. What we're also noting is that the Russians, who are part of this agreement, are also supporting the very same regime. So we have that issue, too. And the question between who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, really highlights just how difficult all of this is.
Jack Rice, former CIA officer and prosecutor, and Ehud Elam, an Israeli national security analyst. Thank you both for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's a tough one for people who look at the nuclear deal, because on the one hand, sure, Iran's been lying. And yes, they had nuclear ambitions, but other than a successful military strike, which might destroy the nuclear program in Iran for 3 or 4 years, I mean, right now they're bottled up, if this nuclear deal is working, for 7.
And just like you said, it is pretty clear that Western powers are not able to trust Iran. This is why they formed a deal with Iran. But do you think it's right to compare between 2002 and the rhetoric about Iraq and lies and nuclear weapons and Netanyahu's presentation now?
No, it's not, and in part because the Bush administration was relying on cherry-picked intelligence accumulated by the CIA and NSA, and here's Israel relying on Iran's own documents. But I think the American public is incredibly wary of any sort of intelligence that's coming from the Middle East that suggests somebody has nukes, and that's, you know, Israel may get burned because of what happened in the United States.
Right.
Still ahead, Mike Pompeo just wrapped up his first trip to the Middle East as Secretary of State. He said Israel has the right to defend itself and urged the Palestinians to return to the negotiating table.
Plus, a deadly day in Afghanistan. At least 25 people killed in a pair of suicide bombings, including 9 journalists.